Hey there, welcome to the channel. I'm Cindy Daycheck with Queen Bee Creations, and we're going to be working on this little cutie. Now this is a jewelry box, right? So, a couple of things about this. It has a spot up here that's missing the pull. It's a fake drawer because this is where this opens up to. I am not looking to replace the hardware because all the drawers are inserted with velvet. To get to the hardware on the back, I would have to be able to remove that. It doesn't want to pop off nicely, which means I'm going to make a mess of the drawers. So in this instance, I'm going to have to work around them. It then means I can't replace this. I'm not going to be able to get exactly the same hardware. And again, it's backed in that velvet. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to just fill it with wood fill and sand it down and paint over it and just ignore it. And it'll be okay because we're going to be fancying this up. We're going to make this go softly romantic because ultimately we're going to be using the new IOD paint inlay Petite Fleurs in the pink color. Now these are limited edition, so bear in mind if you're watching this a year from now, you're probably not going to be able to get this, but you will get the idea of what you can do with this. And you can replace you can place this inlay with another inlay, or you can replace it with a transfer. You could hand paint if you feel so inclined, or you could decoupage. So even if you don't have this particular inlay, I don't want you to think that you cannot use this as a springboard for changing it up from the brown wood and making it something that's very soft, very pretty. So what I am going to do, I'm going to wood fill, like I said, but I'm going to get a base coat of paint on this. Now it's got a little bit of picky painting, and by picky painting, I mean, well, same thing with the drawers. All the little fine edges and that kind of thing. So I will be pulling out a little brush to do that. But it's a small piece, so it's not as big a deal as if I was doing a lot of picky painting on a huge, big sideboard or credenza. And I have to do that sometimes too. I am looking, there's enough space for these drawers that I am looking at painting the sides of this. We're gonna zhuzh this baby up. So what I've elected to do, since this is dark greenery with the pale pink blooms, I want to stay softly romantic, I'm going to use Apothecary by DIY. It does not have a self-sealer in it. It is a clay-based paint. It's going to be easy to distress. I'm kind of looking at that pattern of the inlay. I think will lend itself well. It's got lots of little pieces for me to play with on a small project like this. So any inlays or transfers that have this kind of detailing are going to be great. Are going to be great for your smalls. And this is really fitting into that. So it's going to give us a lot of pieces to be able to play with, to be able to fit in on our sides and, you know, interior surfaces and that kind of thing. So my first step is I have to get one base coat on everything. I will likely do like 2 coats on these upper edges because then I don't have to paint them again. And I'm not going to be applying inlay to them. So I might as well just get them done so I don't have to worry about them. And then I can just worry about the surfaces where I'm going to be applying the inlay. But to start, we're going to do our little bit of wood fill, get that going so that I've got a chance. So I've got a chance to be able to get that drying. And I'm just going to have to get a tool to be able to get some of this out. I just do not use this stuff fast enough for it not to start drying out on me. So I'm always having to grab a nail and get going. So I'm just going to fill these holes, let them dry somewhat, sand it down so I can get this painted out, and then we'll be back. Because the fun part is going to be the design piece of cutting up some of the inlay and seeing which pieces we want to put where. Well, As often happens when you think that you are beginning a nice, simple, easy little project, here's where we're at. Remember I said I can paint the outside of the drawers because there's enough room there to be able to fit them in. And that just means that when I add the paint, that it's not going to be so tight there that it's scraping all the paint off. So I did not plan on painting the underside of these cabinet doors so that, again, I wouldn't be scraping here. What I didn't think about was this part. And when we close this, can you hear it? It's scraping. So before I go any further, what I am going to do is I am going to try and sand down enough of this that if I get 2 coats of paint on it and 2 coats of paint on the lid, this only has 1, but bear in mind, it's 2 coats, this is 2 coats, it's got to have 4 coats of paint room, and I'm probably going to wax this, so it needs room for my wax. The only challenge with that is that I got this velvet liner. Now there's a bit of space between it and the wood, so I'm hoping I have enough space to be able to sand all that down. I'm just pointing this out to you guys because that's life. That's what happens sometimes. And, you know, again, I had to wait till the paint was all dry. I discovered it when I started to do a second coat on things, so I kind of stopped in the middle of my second coating until I get this done so that I can see that I'm going to have enough space and to be able to make that work. So I'm off to sand, and because it's noisy, I'm not going to tune you into it, but I'm just going to take my mouse sander and grind this down and see that I can make enough room. And I'm going to try and visually watch it to ensure that when I start painting it again, I'm not going to have to start sanding again. All right, as you can see, I've got them closing. Now, I have paint on the top, but I do not have paint on the bottom because I'd like them to continue to be able to close. So sometimes you have to make some of those concessions around maybe what the finish would have been, your preference. There's a limit to how much I can sand off and make a difference, right? So I'm okay with this. I'm living with this. The next step that we have is to take a look at our inlay, and I'm using the Petite Fleurs, and make some decisions about which components to cut out. So we've got lots of options about segments that we can use. Let me turn this because I see a piece that I want. There are 2 pages of this one. And so I am thinking of this square being able to go onto this piece. And we may do a little fleur above and below, but I'm gonna get that on first and see, because this could easily become too much very quickly. But because I have 2 of these sheets, I have 2 of these that I'm able to use. So I'll cut out both of those. I'm thinking on the inside here, I have the opportunity to add something. And what was I thinking of adding there? Oh, that's my other square one. None of you. Oh, I know. I was thinking, because I have 2 of these, I was thinking of just doing something with that instead, so that it's just a little softer than the square. Whoops, can't open that while that's open. Do one up in the lid, and then we also have real estate coming down the sides here and the drawers. I don't want it to get too fussy. There are these tiny little flowers, and I may just put one little flower above the handles on each. And then down here, they do have like just plain gold trim, and that's what I'm thinking, you know, maybe at the top of those, once I get those squares on. When we look at down the sides, these are too wide. So I would have loved something like that, but those flowers are too wide to fit on there. And there are shorter ones, and I think that little short guy just makes it in. So I'm probably going to try those two down the front, and I'm going to leave the top blank because I think that would be overkill. So next step is I'm going to get everything cut out, all the pieces cut out that I need, and the rest of the inlay put away so that I'm not splotching water on it or anything. And then we'll come back and we'll start working on the application, so how to be able to apply them. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the different methodologies, especially we've got unsealed paint here, and that's an important distinction. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Let me kind of walk you through from this angle first, just application on the top. And then I'll pull you in overhead and we can just do another quick one on maybe one of the internal surfaces. What I've elected to do, I think I showed you guys, I was thinking of the big square, and then it just looked kind of blocky. And because we were looking at doing these long ones in here, I kind of wanted to stay with that shape. So what I did was I have this shape that I think can go down, and it was very tight, so I've cut it off close to the edges, and it just fits in there. So we're going to apply that. The inlays are artist grade paint, and they are on one side. On an inlay like this, it's easy to tell this is the painted side, this is not. The grid lines appear on the back, the unpainted surface. So you always want to apply it paint down, grid side up. On one like this, it's not an issue. On some of the paler ones, yeah, I've done it backward. It's like, it happens. So don't sweat it, just, you know, do it over. Now, it wants to, you want to, in essence, embed this paint into your surface. So you need to apply it to wet surface. I am working with a clay-based paint. It does not have a top coat, which means when I leave this, I can let it dry completely. But I do want to apply it into a wet painted surface, but I don't want to have globs of paint on there. This is also my chance to kind of clean up some of my painting surfaces here. So let me just do that as I go, which is where I'm not going to be applying anything, which is my edgings and things. But what I want to do is get wet paint on here, and I'm not going to glob it because I'm actually also going to activate that paint by misting it slightly before we apply it. Now, here's the thing. When I do that, I've now activated that paint. So it does mean you're not going to be moving it around. Once you have this on, it's kind of a put it down, don't smudge it, or you're in trouble. I'm going to be distressing slightly, so I'm not concerned if I have a perfect coverage, but I am looking at the lights here to make sure that I've got paint everywhere. Now, I do have my misting bottle. I want to keep it away from my other inlays. And I just want to lightly mist that. Mist one little spot. But see, it keeps misting. I'm not using all that. So it can mist all at once. And I'm gonna hold this very carefully by the unpainted surface and just try and line it up where I want it to go, and then gently lay it down into my surface. And you'll see as you kind of rub it in place, some people use a brayer for this, but you'll see your paint kind of come through, right? The whiteness of that inlay disappears. And once it's where you want it, you're gonna mist the surface again, because I want that paper to go completely transparent. See how it's transparent? And that's going to engage that paint. It's gonna engage that artist grade paint so that it's now kind of working its way to becoming one with my green apothecary. So because I don't have a sealer, I'm now gonna leave this to dry completely, which means my paper will go from translucent to that opaque white again, right? So that piece is done. Now, because that's on the side, I can go and start working on applying it to these sections now. Okay, because I'm not going to interfere with that one on the side. I'm going to want it to dry a little bit more before I go and start flipping it onto this side. But I can work on this on the top just fine. Once our inlay is dry, all that we need to do is spritz it again lightly with water. So what we want to do is we're loosening the paint attached to the inlay backing. Give it, I don't know, no magic here, 20 to 30 seconds. But what we want to do, I have no nails left, is then start lifting it away and hoping that it's leaving that paint behind. You'll see that on the carrier sheet, we still have paint. So I can lay this side up, so paint side up, off to the side, let it dry, because I can still get more uses out of that. The last steps that we have for this is just, I want to lightly sand it. I just want a smoother finish when it's done, and it just kind of evens everything out. So I'm probably gonna do a little bit of light distressing on just some of the edges, but nothing major. That's it. I definitely want to make sure this is dry before I do the sanding, so I don't want to be smearing any of that paint. So make sure it's really dry. Then the last piece is that we want to seal it. Now, I will say this about sealing. I'm going to seal it with wax. Some people have said that when they apply the wax, they smear this. So usually when we're applying wax on furniture, we're rubbing it in, we're brushing up and down, we're really going to town with it. Don't do that, because you're reactivating some of this paint. So you're just going to do a nice light coating, you know, wipe back the excess gently, and then you can buff it the next day when it's dry. If you're concerned about it, you can apply poly. So a polyacrylic of your choice is going to work. Again, some people have said that when they apply poly, that they maybe smear this. Probably because they're really pushing the poly on. However, if it's a concern, just take a spray polyacrylic. Spray it lightly. That's going to act as a fixative, hold it in spot, and then you could seal with either a polyacrylic or a wax. Really your choice. So I'm going to get this sanded up. I'm going to get it waxed up, and then you'll see this pop a little bit more. The Apothecary dries a lot lighter because it's part of the DIY family, so it'll go darker, and we'll see how this looks. I was really kind of excited to see this on like a pale green, which will give it still like that soft Victorian look, but not overly feminine if I'd done it in a pale pink. So I'm gonna finish sanding, dust it all off, and get it waxed up, and then we'll be back. The last thing I wanna do on these is just touch up the hardware a little bit, but nothing major. So I'm taking Golden Rule by DIY, which is a much softer, more translucent gold than is something like, you know, Rub and Buff or an Annie Sloan gilding wax. I like both those products, but you can see it's just kind of brightening it up a little bit. And then I can also just dust a little bit of it. Now, this is just an old, really wrecked brush, and you can see I'm kind of dabbing off most of it. Usually I apply this with my finger, but these edges are really small, and I think my fingers are too fat. I would get too much on. And that's all I want. See how it's just a little hint? That's what I'm gonna do on just all of the edging. This is our finished little cabinet. Look at how sweet that is. I really like that inlay with the Apothecary. It still gives the soft romantic feel to it, but over here, I actually made a mistake. So this is two little pieces of transfer. So look at it this side. Look at it this side. See how the roses are on the top? See how the roses are on the bottom? Yeah, I only noticed that when I went to wax it. And at that point I decided, I don't care. You actually don't see them at the same time. So I'm willing to bet most people won't even catch it. I've had a piece of furniture here where I made a mistake, and not one person, even when I tell them there's a mistake in there, has found the mistake. Now this one's a lot easier, and I will certainly post that there's a mistake. So whoever's buying it knows. I'm not gonna withhold that, but all that's left to do, which I will do tomorrow when I get into the shop, is just buff it up slightly. But it's got the little touch of gold on the hardware and around some of the edging. So it's very soft, it's not in your face, but this is a very soft kind of, you know, little look for that inlay, but super sweet. And I hope that this gives you a better idea of how to be able to use the inlays. I have found that little trick with spritzing the inlay before applying it and then also spritzing it once it's applied really helps with better adhesion. You get a more consistent image. It's also my recommendation if you're putting it into, if you're embedding it into an all-in-one paint. If you're doing an all-in-one paint, you are not waiting for that inlay to completely dry. You know, so you'll apply it into wet paint or a wet top coat. I would spritz it first, so the inlay is wet going into the wet surface, and then you aren't waiting for it to fully dry, because the all-in-one, that top coat on that is gonna dry and harden onto that carrier sheet, and you're just not going to be able to remove it. So what we want to do is let it, when it's just starting to go opaque, right? Now you want to spritz it again and you want to remove it. So putting the inlay on wet, I think helps engage that paint better, more faster, and you get better adhesion, you get a much cleaner, crisper image. I think the beauty of this, because it looks hand painted, is that sometimes you get irregularities. You know, if you get a little air bubble or you get a little crease in it, that's going to show, but it's beautiful. So I hope that, you know what, this gives you perfect time to be able to play with the inlays is on smalls like this. This is a little Bombay jewelry cabinet. I think now that we've filled that in at the top, it's you know, you don't miss the handle so much, and especially because we've got the consistency of the little flowers going down all the way down the center, that it just kind of ties it in. Let me know what you think of this one, guys. Let me know if you've tried the inlays, and if you haven't, if this maybe inspires you to give them a try. There's a lot of beautiful inlays that the IOD sisters are coming out with, that they've already come out with, that they're coming out with. And maybe this one, because it's got so many applications for smalls, it's the one that you want to jump into. I've got all the little pieces off to the side drying, because then I'm going to pack them away and use them on another project. They're a little fainter, but there's still tons of color on there to use. Looking forward to seeing you on the next one. And until then, take care.